session sera enregistrée et affichée sur le canal YouTube GC Coaches Network. Alors, maintenant, j'ai le plaisir de vous présenter la hôte pour cette session, Marie-Josée Dionne. Elle est une coach exécutive accréditée et directrice générale de la planification stratégique, évaluation et recherche à patrimoine canadien. She has 27 years' experience in the federal public service and has held several corporate positions in various departments. She's a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal as part of the Employment Equity Team and awarded an executive certificate in public leadership from Harvard Kennedy School. MJ is committed to create opportunities that nurture professional and personal growth towards a rewarding life. La parole est à vous, Marie-Josée.
Welcome to all participants. Bienvenue à tous. It is with great pleasure I've accepted to be the host for this session. Lots of gratitude to be collaborating with those wonderful panelists. So the session will be Speaking the Unspoken, Hearing the Unheard, and Seeing the Unseen. First, I would like to acknowledge, wherever you are in Canada, that we are gathered today on the territories of Canada's First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Je suis de la région de Gatineau, de l'Outaouais, donc c'est le territoire traditionnel des peuples algonquins. I would like to make this session interactive. So despite the limitation of the technology, I invite you to share your thoughts, reaction in the chat. Donc soyez préparés à réagir. We will be spending the next 90 minutes exploring coaching through a lens of intersectionality with 4 extraordinary panelists that will be sharing their knowledge and their lived experience. I would like to start by introducing Angela Meoni. She is a coach, speaker, trainer, and nature therapy practitioner. She is also a diverse ability advocate, a term she uses to open our minds to see people as having diverse abilities instead of a disability. Angela knows firsthand what it takes to make significant life changes. After 25 years working for the federal government and nonprofit organizations, Angela experienced a brain injury. Seeing the gift in her new circumstance, Angela decided to become a coach. This experience also led Angela to spearhead a pilot project to help organizations support the career development of people like herself. This project aims to address the needs of employees who wish to transition into a new career due to their health or a diverse ability to optimize their well-being and their contribution to their organization. Welcome, Angela. Magdalene Cooman désolée, je dois parler un peu en français. Alors, Magdalene est directrice principale du programme du Centre d'emploi compétences mondiales et a 17 ans d'expérience dans le secteur de l'établissement de nouveaux arrivants à Ottawa, principalement dans le domaine de l'emploi et de l'intégration économique. Elle a piloté plusieurs initiatives de partenariat privé et public offrant des opportunités d'emploi et de mentorat aux nouveaux arrivants. Elle dirige le programme d'autonomisation des femmes de minorités visibles nouvellement arrivées, visant à assurer leur réussite sur le marché du travail canadien. Magdalene est reconnue pour son leadership à Ottawa. Lors de la Journée internationale de la femme en 2020, elle s'est vue décerner le prix de pilier communautaire par Femmes remarquables Ottawa. Et en 2009, elle a reçu un prix de leader communautaire décerné par Immigrant Women's Services Ottawa. Elle a également été vice-présidente et présidente du conseil d'administration de cette organisation de 2013 à 2015. Thank you, Magdalene, to be here today. Shery Alexander Heinis is currently an assignment with United Way East Ontario from Innovation, Science and Economic Development, where she has worked on a range of entrepreneurship files for the past decade. A former diplomat from St. Lucia, so lucky, she earned a master in philosophy in international relations from the University of Cambridge and has worked in foreign affairs, diplomacy, international trade, and small business development with both regional and international agencies, including UNESCO and La Francophonie. Shery began writing poetry in Ottawa, in Ottawa to help her navigate some life challenges, including developing a facial nerve disorder. She has since self-published her first chapbook, A Greater Whole, as well as her debut poetry, an advanced collection, Splendor, and co-created In Our Tongues, an arts nonprofit that showcases, nurtures, and advances Black, Indigenous, and racialized artists. Thank you, Shery, for being here today. Tejumo Ogouma possède 14 ans d'expérience dans la fonction publique, citoyenneté et immigration et affaires mondiales Canada. Au cours de son mandat à AMC, Tejumo a travaillé dans des programmes de développement pour l'Afghanistan, le Vietnam, le Cambodge et le Meoni. Praticien de la pleine conscience de longue date, et formé à la résolution alternative des conflits, Tejumo croit en la promotion de la prise de conscience, de l'empathie et de la communication pour créer un monde plus pacifique et progressif. Tejumo poursuit sa formation en coaching auprès de l'Institut Coactive Training et il est instructeur et membre de la faculté de l'École de la fonction publique. Merci beaucoup, Tejumo, d'être ici aujourd'hui. Wow, collectively, you bring a lot of experience, knowledge, and wisdom. So I would like to start by looking at what is intersectionality. L'approche intersectionnelle fait actuellement l'objet de nombreuses discussions, merci, dans les milieux de la recherche et de l'intervention sociale, et ce particulièrement parmi ceux qui se préoccupent des questions de discrimination, d'exclusion et de groupes marginalisés ou ethnicisés. Today, our objective is to raise awareness and reflect on why intersectionality matters. Why does it matter in our coaching, in our organization, in Canada? The proposed graphic illustrates some of the identity factors considered in GBA+. This figure illustrates some of the factors which can intersect with sex and gender. From the word sex, in a clockwise order, other identity factors are written: language, ethnicity, race, religion, age, disability, geography, culture, income, sexual orientation, and education. As another way to introduce intersectionality, I would like to share a quote from Dr. Errol. And please, as I read the quote, share your reflection in the chat. All human beings encounter is an opportunity to participate in healing the collective damage of how difference has been managed in our human history and the damage that it continues to do so. Chaque rencontre nous confronte simultanément aux défis humains de la différence, de l'altérité et de la déconnexion et aux besoins humains de similitude et d'affirmation, de visibilité et de connexion. Part of the challenge is to recognize that all human encounters include not only opportunities for healing, but also the inevitable ways that we participate in the triggering of the pain and shame of human history. Que faisons-nous du défi les uns autres dans nos interactions avec nos clients, nos étudiants, nos collègues de travail? So we are really lucky today to have panelists that have already agreed to participate, to talk a little bit about their intersections. So I'm very curious. What are your intersections, Angela?
Je suis une âme qui s'épanouit en forme physique et non physique. Mes croyances et ma foi façonnent ma réalité. Ma capacité diversifiée, invisible, touche tous les aspects de ma vie. Ma capacité diversifiée est une ligne pointillée. Parfois, il y a des lignes plus solides. Lorsque je rencontre des barrières au travail, dans le système médical et dans le monde qui m'entoure. Je m'identifie comme une femme du Nord, dans les territoires Cri et Ojibwe, avec des racines mondiales, comme une gardienne de la terre, multi-ethnique, multilingue, créatrice, étudiante, enseignante et agente de changement. Sœur, fille, épouse et beau-parent. Et finalement, une amie.
Merci, Angela. Shery, why don't you share a little bit of your story and who you are?
Thank you, Marie-Josée. I will just express myself in a poem. I was born where the glare of tin roofs burned the eyes at midday, where towering breadfruit trees spread their sun-tanned shadows over raggedy yards. I am she-woman, rock and sand, my flesh. Oceans pulse through my veins. My legs are mountains that straddle continents. My face is an electric fire. Grains of hot sand crawl up my left cheek. Hot needles thread through my left eye. I am here to share my voice. I am here because I am. Thank you, Marie-Josée. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shery. Magdalene.
Thank you, Marie-Josée. I am Magdalene. I am a her, a mother, a stepmother, an aunt, a grand-aunt, a visible minority woman, a St. Lucian woman with Indian heritage, a partner, a Canadian, a Caribbean national, a writer, a poet, an entrepreneur, a soul seeker, a director, a life coach, an advocate for newcomers, a career coach for newcomers to Canada. I am she. Thank you.
Thank you, Magdalene. Tejumo, le dernier, mais non le moindre. Oh, tu es en sourdine, Tejumo. Parfait, merci.
Je suis Tejumo et dans ma langue native, dans la langue Yoruba, Tejumo, ça veut dire persévère. Donc, je suis persévère. Je suis un homme noir, africain, de la communauté LGBTQ. Je suis aussi un immigrant francophone. Je suis un voyageur, marié dans une famille juive, un artiste et une personne. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Wow, quelle belle diversité. Quelle belle diversité. Thank you so much for sharing. As you can see, this approach can be a way of introducing and recognizing intersectionality. For example, the coachee and the coach can use the spoken word, poetry, visual images to identify intersections. I'm curious to know, you probably have a lot of experiences also as a participant. So what are the other tools and techniques you can use for creating welcome and safe space to connect? So please use the chat once again. Maintenant, je voudrais tourner la parole à Tejumo pour nous expliquer à travers du prochain exercice what's the meaning of the pronoun? Can you go through that exercise with us, Tejumo, s'il vous plaît?
Thank you, Marie-Josée. So Tejumo, I identify as he, him. And of course, I'm inviting everybody to come in with a pronoun, but the idea of having pronoun is that we usually use pronoun thinking that people's appearance and gender is what defines their pronouns. That's what we do traditionally. But in reality, there are people who do not identify with the male or female gender, with neither gender, or they identify with both genders. So we cannot assume that we know the pronoun to use for other people. One way to do that is to invite people to share their pronoun. And I can give you an example. For example, I can say, hi, I'm Tejumo. I identify as a he, him. What's your name and what are your pronouns? By doing that, we invite, we include, we validate other people's identity and include them. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. So it's becoming a common practice. I don't know if you see it in your organization, but more and more people are using the pronouns in bracket after their name, which is great. Nous avons jusqu'à maintenant abordé la question de l'intersectionnalité, à savoir qu'est-ce que ça veut dire à travers un graphique. Vous avez entendu l'intersectionnalité à travers nos panélistes. But maintenant, I would like to change a little bit gear here and ask you, each participant, why is intersectionality important now? Please use the chat to respond. I don't know if just going to open my chat here to see. Why is it important now? So while you are thinking about it and reflecting in the chat, I will turn to Magdalene to tell us a little bit, why is intersectionality important now?
Thank you, Marie-Josée. So first off, I believe that intersectionality was always a part of our identity, but it is more prominent now because it provides a framework to understand our social world and how individuals are impacted both negatively and positively. So for example, there is a greater awareness of the complex web of factors which impacts a person's life, such as race, gender, inequalities, social relationships, etc. In my own specific case, and what I advocate for is for the economic integration of newcomers into the Canadian workforce. And there are many inequalities and inequities that face them, which is why, for example, I work with a specific project for visible minority newcomer women. And the reason that this project has come into existence from the Canadian government, the federal government, is because it was statistically shown that visible minority newcomer women are behind in the workforce by 9%. And that definitely proves a case to go a little bit deeper. Why? What is impacting them that those social inequalities exist? So I can see the many intersectionalities of a visible minority newcomers' lived experiences based on their education, based on income, based on nationality, language abilities, mental health, citizenship status, cultural orientation, religion, how she dresses. And this all can impact her access to information, the access to networks, opportunity, which ultimately impacts her employment status.
Thank you, and I'm happy to hear as well that you raised the fact that it could be negative, but it's also could be a lot positive. So, yes. Tejumo, yes, thank you. Tejumo, so why is it important now?
Oui, merci beaucoup Marie-Josée. Je pense que je suis d'accord avec ma collègue Magdalene, mais j'aimerais peut-être revenir sur des événements plus récents qu'on a vécu en fait. Tu vas te souvenir du mouvement Me Too. Tu vas te souvenir aussi de l'ampleur après la mort de George Floyd et Black Lives Matter. Donc, ces mouvements sont devenus proéminents. Et je pense qu'il y a vraiment 3 facteurs très importants qui sont en train de nous amener vers l'intersectionnalité. La première, ce que je pense, c'est que vraiment, il y a une évolution sociale qui fait croire et qui ramène à la conscience le fait que la sexualité humaine ou l'identité humaine est fluide et en évolution. Si quelqu'un allait dans le dictionnaire de la sexualité aujourd'hui, il va voir que le vocabulaire est en plein changement. Et avec le changement de ce vocabulaire vient aussi la conscience un peu des rapports de pouvoir en termes de sexualité et d'identité. Le deuxième mouvement spécifique que je vois, et plus clairement par rapport au Canada, c'est qu'on est dans une société qui est diverse, en fait, qui est jeune et dynamique. Et dans certaines villes canadiennes, beaucoup de Canadiens ne sont pas nés au Canada, ils grandissent ici. Donc, ça nous amène à repenser la question non seulement de la diversité, de l'inclusion, mais pluralisme. Et quand je dis pluralisme, un individu peut être pluriel en fonction de tout ce qu'il contient en lui, mais la société peut être plurielle aussi. Alors, comment coexister ce type de pluralisme? Le dernier mouvement, c'est que je pense qu'on est dans la 4e révolution industrielle. Les technologies vont vite, les social médias vont vite. La jeune génération qui va arriver sur le marché du travail va avoir des exigences différentes. Donc, avec ces 3 mouvements, on arrive à un point où, alors que les intersectionnalités étaient marginalisées, cachées, où les gens étaient discriminés avec, on veut faire un mouvement où on prend plus conscience de ce que c'est les intersectionnalités, mais aussi de les renverser. Donc, au fait, au lieu de me discriminer parce que je suis noir ou francophone, c'est de voir qu'est-ce que quelqu'un comme Tejumo peut rapporter à partir de ces différences et de ces identités multiples. Ça va pour moi, ça va pour tous mes collègues ici. Donc, je pense que cette approche intersectionnelle nous amène à voir les choses d'une différente façon.
Merci, intéressant. J'aime l'idée du pluralisme individuel, du pluralisme collectif. I am turning to the chat because we had a few reflections from the audience. Intersectionality allows us to identify our privilege. It's a process of vulnerability which highlights our humanity and collective wisdom. Wow. Any reactions to that, Angela? No? Angela, do you want to react to? No? Can you hear me, Angela? No? Okay. I can.
If I can, Marie-José.
Okay, really please do.
Yes, I really like what the quote in the chat box, and I want to reflect on the quote that you shared earlier on from the writer, on the particular point that says, and backs her up in her writing here, each encounter confronts us simultaneously with the human challenge of difference, otherness, and disconnection, and the human need for similarity and affirmation, visibility, and connection. I think what the person in the panelist is writing really speaks to the writer's quote, because it is that humanity that we are all seeking. And somehow society has found ways of pulling it apart, and privilege becomes a big part of us identifying our privilege. But depending on where you live in the world as well, depending on the color of your skin, depending on the language you choose, depending on your religion, all of these give different accesses to different types of privilege. But as the writer says here, we need to be very careful that we do not disconnect people from these privileges because they don't belong to a certain group. So looking at this, the need for human beings, the similarity, affirmation, visibility, and connection are so critical, Marie-José, when we are looking at intersectionality as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Magdalene. And also in the chat, many of the participants do agree with you that it was always important. Intersectionality was always important. Unfortunately, many were ignoring it. COVID has focused societal attention in different ways and removed the blinders Tejumo, ça fait un peu partie de ce que tu nous partageais également. C'est un peu la réflexion que tu avais. Tu veux ajouter là-dessus?
Oui, je pense qu'aussi, donc en regardant ce qui est dans le chat, ce qui me vient en tête, c'est la notion d'authenticité. Donc, si je veux, ou une personne veut arriver et être elle-même totalement humaine, et arriver totalement humaine dans un espace, donc elle a besoin de venir telle qu'elle est, au lieu de séparer, de cacher ou de marginaliser certaines parties d'elle-même. Et je pense qu'en embrassant toutes les parties de qui nous sommes vraiment capables de produire plus et d'apporter plus à cette société, et nous donnons le droit aux autres de faire le même et de les accommoder.
Et se donner le droit, j'aime ça. Angela, I don't know if you can hear me now or if you're unmuted. If technically, no, we couldn't, no, or maybe Shery, no. Okay, so we will continue with the chat. Intersectionality allows people to present as their full selves and advocate for their full selves instead of being forced to prioritize one identity over another and break themselves up in pieces to receive services, being recognized, etc. Is that the same feeling that you have, Magdalene?
Yes.
Does that resonate with you? Yeah.
For sure. And I think the other reason that it's so relevant now is because there's a greater awareness of us as people, as whole people, not pieces of people. And this, as this awareness shifts individually, it also shifts collectively in the community, which Marie-Josée we are going to look at later, on how it affects organizations and why it's relevant to coaching, because as we become more aware that we are not a piece of a thing, we are a whole thing, we too look for services that will cater to all of who we are. Excellent point.
Thank you. Excellent point for sure. I'm wondering if other panelists want to add. No? Good. So a question was, I know I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but I don't know if you could share with the participants a little bit the barriers that you see currently.
For me and for, there are several barriers, but I'll speak to visible minority women in particular. You know, the thing of feeling invisible is a real barrier. And I know that in speaking to so many visible minority people or ethnic minorities around me, the work that I do, you feel invisible in so many ways when you're looking for work. It's like you are not seen, you are skipped over. You send in your resume, a name discriminates you, a look discriminates you. You go into a competition, and sometimes you never really get a reason why you were not selected for a job sometimes. And you don't really know what's in the mind of somebody else, why they're not choosing you. But the fact that the research and the statistics are showing that visible minorities are so behind in the access to the labor market shows that there is an element of invisibility. And to remove that barrier, it means that more people on the other side must become more aware of the talent, the potential, and to make these human beings become more visible to the labor market. So that's one barrier. So Tejumo, I don't know whether you want to expand on another barrier that you probably see.
Oui, bien sûr, c'est un bon point. Moi, je pense que je vois deux choses. La première, c'est vraiment, en tant qu'être humain naturel, d'avoir de l'empathie, mais de la réserver seulement aux personnes qui nous ressemblent. Alors que l'intersectionnalité, pour qu'elle marche, et la barrière, c'est d'étendre l'empathie vers les autres, vers le cercle qu'on ne connaît pas. Une autre barrière que je vois sur laquelle on doit travailler, c'est que si vous parlez d'intersectionnalité, les gens peuvent vous dire, ben, c'est du politiquement correct. Pourquoi donner plus de droits aux autres? Et la notion derrière, c'est que si on donne plus de droits aux autres, ça diminue mes droits à moi. Et je pense que dans le droit, il n'y a pas une égalité mathématique. Donner plus de droits, respecter, reconnaître différents aspects d'une personne ne va pas enlever, éliminer différents aspects de ma personne. Donc, les barrières, c'est vraiment ces deux mentalités de limiter l'empathie et de penser que l'augmentation du droit d'une part diminue le droit d'une autre part. Moi, je pense que c'est des mentalités que nous devons en fait lutter contre pour un avancement.
Merci beaucoup, Tejumo. Beaucoup de barrières encore that we have to eliminate that are systemic for sure. Les barrières de l'emploi, to participation, to fully participate. Tejumo, I feel like I want to do or speak about what you have expressed, but from a mother perspective, we always say that a mother's heart, you know, it's not because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. It's just growing and growing and growing. It's not because you give to somebody that, you know, there's less for somebody else. So, merci beaucoup pour ceci. So I would like to move to the next question, and then after we'll go for a quick health break. So moving into the intersectionality and why is it relevant to coaching? So I would like to invite all participants to tell me what is our experience in coaching and why intersectionality is so relevant to be aware of, and what are the techniques that are out there to unpack all of that. So Shery, please tell us, what do you see as intersectionality and how is it relevant to coaching? Coaching from a coach's perspective, but you could also add from a coachee perspective.
Thank you very much, MJ. I will start with a quote from St. Lucia-born poet and Nobel laureate in literature, Derek Walcott. Break a vase, and the love that reassembles the fragments is stronger than that love which took its symmetry for granted when it was whole. Now, I will speak from the perspective of a coachee because I'm not a coach and I don't have that background. So I would say intersectionalities, of course, intersectionalities are important to coaching because we are all very complex, fragmented, and paradoxical human beings. So when a coach enters the space of a coachee, the coach has to understand the whole spectrum of that person to be able to best serve and support the coachee. Now, for myself, I look at my multitude of intersectionalities as fragments of myself. So this means for me, I would need a coach who can help me explore and also assemble those fragments of myself into a coherent whole. It would be important for me as well to have a coach who is able to provide me with a safe space that I could express myself, will ask me questions that allow me to come up with questions, with answers that can help me better articulate myself. And I'm someone who has a number of disabilities. One of them is a facial nerve disorder. And for me, I find it much easier to express myself in writing. So I'm here speaking for the moment, but I feel more comfortable writing. So I would need a coach who would understand that and who would invite me to use the means of expression that I'm most comfortable with, that I am in alignment with, that speaks to my heart. So this is for me how I feel seen, and this is how I feel heard. Thanks,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing, Shery. This is so interesting. I'm sure Angela would like to jump in and continue the discussion.
Yes. Merci, Marie-Josée. Excusez-moi pour toutes les difficultés que j'ai eues. Intersectionnalité n'est pas seulement pertinente pour le coaching. Intersectionnalité fait partie intégrante du coaching. Être sensible, conscient, ouvert en cherchant à comprendre l'identité, l'environnement, les expériences et les valeurs d'un client apparaît dans 5 des 8 compétences de base identifiées par la Fédération internationale de coaching. Ces compétences sont particulièrement pertinentes maintenant, car nous vivons une période d'articulation enflammée et de prise de conscience de la discrimination dans notre société et dans le monde. Il y a un élan croissant dans le changement qui impacte toutes nos intersectionnalités. Je crois, comme tant de coachs, nous avons la possibilité et la responsabilité d'accueillir cet espace. Un espace où nous et nos clients peuvent exprimer le non-dit, entendre le non entendu et voir l'invisible. Nous avons les outils et la passion pour créer cet espace pour nous-mêmes et nos clients, afin d'articuler la vision du monde dans laquelle nous voulons vivre. C'est pourquoi nous avons choisi le titre pour cette panel aujourd'hui. As a person with a diverse ability, articulating my own intersectionality has been particularly challenging in the workplace. As a coach during these unprecedented times, we are asked to create spaces where people can come and be all of who they are and bring all of that to the table. Coaching helps us to enter into a frame of being that inspires hope and inspired action. Coaching empowers us to shape how we present ourselves to the world, rather than be shaped by solely how the world sees us. Coaching from a lens of intersectionality is about inviting our clients and ourselves to show up in the wholeness of who we are. And Shery's analogy of the vase is so beautiful. It touches on that it's even more beautiful. And there's even a practice, a Japanese practice of adding gold to things that are broken, and it actually brings more value. And from this place, we can integrate all of who we are, a place where we no longer defend, prove, protect, or hide, as Lisa Nichols so eloquently says. For me, as a person with a diverse ability, this means entering into a place of knowing that there is nothing within me that's broken, that needs fixing, or needs managing. Thank you, Marie-Josée.
Merci. I heard so many things that I would be so interested to talk about, but you know, the responsibility as a coach to open that space, to see what's invisible, it's so key. And thank you, Angela, for reminding us of our competencies and our responsibility related to that. Also really appreciate the fact that nothing's broken. It's just like pieces of gold, right? So, and we are giving and providing that gift to the world. So thank you. Also, I see people reacting to what Shery and you, Angela, was sharing. And Shery, of course, there's always good quotes in terms of how your poetry is so beautiful. And thank you for sharing, for sure. There's nothing broken, nothing to be fixed. It's so beautiful. This is so inspirational for me. Thank you for speaking so freely. One question is, I am a little confused about the use of the term intersectionality in this webinar, as the word originates from Kimberly Crenshaw. was used to identify how multiple and overlapping dimensions of diversity future marginalize people. We can talk about that a lot, but do you have a few words just to respond to that question? Angela or Shery, or are you still on mute? And okay.
Sure, I'd love to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to say that this session was really initiated from the place of where we're at today. More so than ever, there's such momentum to look at our intersectionalities. Yes, the origin of the use of the word and the concept of intersectionality back 20 years ago, where it really took root, was around discrimination and multiple discriminations. But we now, with this session and since then, we're really building on the concept of looking at how all of the elements of who we are, how that shapes who we are today. And so it is to invite that, because often we think we don't have intersectionalities if we're not experiencing discrimination. And we all do. We all have different intersectionalities.
Hopefully it responds to the question. Please continue to write us in the chat if Magdalene wants to add. Thank you, Magdalene.
Sure, I want to add on to what Angela is saying in terms of how the concept is getting to be broader in this modern world that we're living in. I think a big part of it is rooted in the lived experiences of people. And as we learn those lived experiences in the global context, and I think the globalization has actually created a smaller space in the world, that we are no longer living in little isolated boxes anymore. We are aware of best practices. People are sharing their stories. They are doing so openly. They are talking about their lived experiences. And as coaches, that's so important, because we can only work with a person from a place of a lived experience, not from a place of just a framework. So coaching from intersectionality means also listening really carefully to the lived, real experiences of a person, and not categorizing a person in a box with a whole lot of other things without understanding that lived experience. Okay.
Thank you, Magdalene. I think Tejumo also wants to add a little bit. Thank you, Tejumo.
Ouais. Donc, un dernier mot sur ça que je voudrais aborder, c'est que donc la relation de coaching est une relation. Et quand deux personnes se rencontrent, il peut y avoir de l'isolement parce qu'on est différents, mais il peut y avoir aussi des points communs parce qu'on est ensemble. Et de cette relation va naître une transformation, surtout pour le client et même pour le coach qui va apprendre. Alors, il ne peut pas avoir de vraie transformation si l'humanité du client ne vient pas sur la table, ne vient pas dans l'espace. Alors, quelle bonne manière de venir à l'humanité de l'autre personne en face de nous en passant par le point de vue, l'approche intersectionnelle qui, elle, regarde tous les aspects. Oui, il pourrait y avoir des points sur lesquels les gens sont marginalisés, mais pour quelqu'un qui veut embrasser l'humanité de l'autre, elle est obligée de voir, d'accepter, de reconnaître toutes les facettes de l'autre personne. Et je pense que c'est pour ça que c'est très important dans le coaching d'avoir cette dimension intersectionnelle. Et je voudrais aussi, je pense que Baïch avait envoyé un commentaire dans ce sens.
Ouais, d'accord. Shery.
I just wanted to add as well, as somebody who is quite intersectional, and I look at them, as I said, as fragments of myself. You could also look at them as different layers, right? It's just like one layer being added upon another. And the impact of all of these layers is, what is the life outcome? How does that affect your life? How does that affect the quality of your life? How does that affect your potential to be a whole person and to make your greatest contribution? And I think that, to me, for myself, I could say that this is what is important about my intersectionalities, does it in any way limit the growth and the full blooming of who I am? And it does. In my everyday lived experience, that is the lived outcome. And this is what we need to address in terms of intersectionalities. How can coaches help the person with multiple intersectionalities be able to live a full and whole life and walk into who they fully are? I think that as well, the life outcome, the impact on the quality of the life, for me, is also what's important.
Wait, it's a good point. Quality of life, reaching their full potential. And I would also add to what Tejumo was saying, the coachee learns, but the coaches learn a lot as well in that relationship. It's a partnership, and we are all learning through that experience. So yes, this is great. Muriel was also saying, le coaching permet de dévoiler les angles morts, des fois qui sont inconscients du coaché, mais aussi du coach. Du coach. On regarde des en regard des intersectionnalités. Sa pertinence est majeure, puisqu'entendre le coacher dans son dialogue interne est la clé de l'accompagnement. Donc, l'importance d'avoir bien une mise en œuvre de nos compétences comme coach. Magdalene, le mot de la fin avant le petit health break. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add another point, like coming out of COVID, or while we are in this particular space, it's really, from my work, I can see how the lives of some of the women we're working with have changed in 1 year of the pandemic. And we talk about lived experiences and how important it is to know that. So a person, I have a note here that says, from the coaching room and the coaching space, we need to allow individuals to stretch across time, history, space, current circumstances, and the future states they wish to arrive in. We see mental health, for example, Marie-José, with some people today. A year ago, they did not have mental health issues. A year into the pandemic, we have these developed anxiety, fear, disturbances. And if we have to learn as coaches to be able to address people where they are, not where we left them or into the future, because we may miss the moment of working with those intersectionalities if we are not paying attention to their current state of being.
Exactly. Paying attention. And again, I'm coming back to seeing the invisible. How do you go about seeing that invisible, right? And what does that mean? So talking about mental health, yes, the COVID challenged all of us with that, and we got to remain resilient. So I will give you a 2 minute to just move a little bit, and then we'll come back after 2 minutes for the half session. Thank you. Bonjour, j'espère que vous avez eu la chance de vous dégourdir un peu. Let's tackle the half of the session, and I would like to be a little bit more practical now and talk a little bit about why is intersectionality relevant in our organization. So I would like to invite you once again, thank you very much, because I like to read the chat and all the reflections that are out there. So don't be shy. S'il vous plaît, participez, mettez vos questions, vos réflexions dans le chat. And we will tackle now, why is it relevant to our organization? Or is it? Maybe it's not. So I'm just curious, is it relevant right now in your organization from your perspective? So I would like to invite Magdalene to speak first on this topic.
Yeah, this is a very important question, Marie-José, and the answer is yes, it is relevant to our organizations because for several reasons. One, it's about accountability. As organizations, are we accountable for the people who we serve, and are we meeting the needs? That's the first point. So for example, at the World Skills Employment Center, we serve immigrants and refugees. Each of these have unique needs. For example, a person who's arriving in Canada as a refugee may have a different set of needs than a person who's arriving here from the economic class. And as an organization, we have a responsibility to look at the unique intersections of both of these groups to see whether we are providing the appropriate service. So for example, a man who is a refugee who has experienced war and violence in his life, his intersections are different from a person who comes from a safe and sheltered place. One person may need help with traumatic help for trauma. Another person does not need help for trauma, but needs help to just integrate into the labor market. The second big point for why it's really important for organizations is that I think the world for workplaces are moving more towards an inclusive approach. And with that inclusive approach, it means that if one organization is serving clients better from a holistic perspective and another is not, the one who is will get a higher number of clients coming forward. They'll be able to provide a better service, more funding, more resources than the organization who is not paying attention to serving a person from a holistic perspective.
For sure, we have an accountability for sure for our employee. I totally agree. And being diverse and inclusive can be very effective for an organization. I'm curious, Angela, on your side, what do you see from your perspective in your department?
Yes, well, I totally agree with Magdalene and a lot of the people who are adding things to the chat. Intersectionality is really important and relevant to our organization because it recognizes the multiple isms and discrimination faced by people within our organizations. Intersectionality also reveals to us the process of othering that takes place in our organizations. And in the words of Shelley P. Harrell, who we quoted earlier, every human encounter is an opportunity to participate in the collective healing of how difference has been managed. Everything from the ways we communicate our corporate culture to the discussions we have at the water cooler offers an opportunity for this collective healing or othering. For many of us, being managed means that we are not part of the we. This is most evident in the approach of many organizations that they've taken in dealing with persons with diverse abilities by creating what is referred to as disability management services. So I really liked the work of John A. Powell, who's the director of Othering and Belonging Institute and a professor of law at the University of California. And he talks about the process of othering. He refers to othering as something that we do as a practice Basically, it means denying someone their full humanity and denying mutuality. The practice of othering is actually a gradient from refusing to shake someone's hand, denying their voice, saying or acting as if they're less than, acts of violence, and even death. In other words, they are not part of the we. And they are seen like something's wrong with them. Dr. Powell, though, cautions us not to fall into the trap of thinking that the solution to the process of othering is saming. Saming is the premise that I'll accord you respect and dignity because you're just like me. Saming comes with conditions, and it de-emphasizes differences. Belonging, however, is when our full humanity is embraced. As a group and as an individual, we are seen as a value, and we're all part of the we. We have a voice. We get to define the world we live in. Dr. Powell also speaks of the language of inclusion and how the language of inclusion is not the same as the language of belonging. It's one thing to say that I want to include you. It's still my game, it's still my world, and I'm inviting you in. The language of belonging is that we belong together. We are co-creating, and you and I both have power and agency. But we are also striving for belonging without othering. Belonging takes us beyond inclusion by emphasizing our mutual responsibility. A responsibility not only to create a world and a space where I belong, but a world and a space where you belong. So what does this mean for our organizations? It means that an organization must go beyond purely inviting others to their game, to their vision, to their systems, and to their decision-making tables. It means that the practice of othering within an organization needs to be seen and understood. And this is a shared responsibility. And together we can and must co-create a space of belonging within our organizations. Thanks, Marie-Josée.
Thank you so much, Angela. And you talked about the culture and the importance of the organizational culture, and it needs to change for sure. And the mutual responsibility from an employee-employer perspective, that is key. But I really like, if we want to change, if we want to be a game changer and change the rules of the games, if I'm a CIO of a big organization today, and I would like to know from your perspective, what's the first step? How can I measure where I'm at and where I'm going? I'm just curious. Angela or Magdalene?
Yeah.
Angela, go.
Sure. I love that question, because it is, where do I begin? And I've been, even in terms of any organization, whether it's a department within a federal government or our nonprofit organization, our volunteer organization, to me, it's so much based on relationships. We can't begin to try to develop policies, to develop services in isolation, in a vacuum. We really have to build relationships with the people who are going to be using these services. They need to be involved from the get-go in the design, into the concept, into the naming of the services and the programs. We need to be able to see them in the leadership. We need to see them in the roles of the design and the creation of it. So to me, it's really about building those relationships. If you are in a leadership position, it's a real important, and it's an opportunity to invite people together and to really have that, as we do in coaching, that deep listening, and be able to really, and also to see what's often unseen, and to hear what's unheard, what people are not saying. So it's really, this is where the coaching competencies are so important for our leadership, for the people who are shaping, for people who are designing programs, to be able to really build on those connections and really listen to, you know, some of the people we're saying on the chat around the blind spots that we have as coaches, as well as individuals in positions of leadership. So that's where I begin.
Thank you, thank you. And I see also in the chat, David saying it's co-creation. For me, it's intersectionality by design. That's what I'm hearing. So I'm just wondering, Magdalene, since you have experience in organizations, what can you add to this, and how can we help coaches coaching in that regard?
I want 2 points here. A big piece Angela has already alluded to has to do with leadership. When the leadership is aligned on issues like diversity, inclusion, intersectionalities, it's very easy to trickle down to everybody else on the staff. And the co-creation of policies, it is so important. At world scales, the staff is often engaged in creating policies for the workplace, for service, because we all understand the clientele that we are serving. It's so diverse that we also want to make sure that we are recognizing all these different intersectionalities. So leadership is important. Secondly, trust is important. So, you know, even though an organization has policies, but no one is trusting of the people who are managing them, it's very difficult for employees to open up. So this active listening, which Angela spoke about earlier, it's very important, because I, as an employee, I will only bring all of who I am to an organization when I know there is a safe space for me. And I want to know for sure that I'm respected. If I said I am 3 things and I know that they're going to be hit with discriminatory airs, I probably wouldn't say it, right? So that safety space is really important. And the last piece that I want to say is that training is always available for leaders. And it's important for leaders and organizations to invest in training for the staff to understand these issues deeply. Because if you have only a few of the people in the organization who understand those issues and others who don't, you could never really get on the same bandwagon, you know. And if the training, the investment is made well, everyone is benefits. And guess what? There's also research that shows that the diversity of thought and problem solving actually creates more profitable organizations. You waste less time, you're more on board, and it actually spins profits for companies as well.
You invest to understand, and also the leadership to empower all, I say all of us, all the employees, and being at the table for decision making is key. Yes. Tejumo, la parole est à toi.
Oui, merci beaucoup. J'aimerais ajouter certains points. Je suis d'accord avec Magdalene et Angela, mais je pense qu'on peut aussi élever le débat sur l'intersectionnalité à un niveau politique et géopolitique. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, nous sommes dans une crise climatique. Certaines régions du monde sont dans une crise démographique. Il y a une pandémie globale. Et aussi, nous faisons face à la montée de l'autoritarisme dans certaines régions du monde. Alors, qu'est-ce qui va différencier le Canada, la société canadienne et les organisations canadiennes? Moi, je pense qu'il y a 3 qualités. Ça va être notre résilience, notre adaptation et notre flexibilité. Eh bien, pour que ces organisations canadiennes du futur montent une société qui est capable d'être résiliente, qui résiste à l'autoritarisme, comme j'en parle, il faut vraiment mettre l'accent sur l'intersectionnalité pour ramener la diversité des personnes. Parce que aujourd'hui, je pense, donc, on aborde le changement climatique par l'approche scientifique, une approche rationnelle, mais peut-être qu'il est le temps de voir le changement climatique par l'imaginaire des Premières Nations, l'imaginaire des sociétés traditionnelles, ça apporte d'autres lunettes. Donc, je pense qu'on ne peut plus se permettre de résoudre les problèmes humains avec les mêmes façons de faire, avec les mêmes personnes à la table. Il faut avoir un moyen de diversifier, de varier, inviter les femmes, inviter les victimes, inviter les personnes marginalisées à partager de leur expérience. Et juste pour ça, je pense qu'on est vraiment à un moment où on doit le faire, parce qu'autrement, je ne verrais pas ce qui différencie une société canadienne d'une société qui se veut autoritaire et qui veut le conformisme et qui veut vraiment la conformité pour ses citoyens. Et je pense que ça aussi, c'est quelque chose à prendre en compte.
Tous d'excellents points, Tejumo. Merci beaucoup de nous avoir aussi donné cette vision plus grande et globale qui est comme notre planète et tous les défis. Je pense que dans les prochaines années, ça va de travailler tout ensemble, pas nécessairement au sein de notre organisation ou du Canada, mais ça va être vraiment à l'échelle mondiale. Alors, merci beaucoup. Je pense que c'est important d'ouvrir et de porter différentes lunettes. Now I would like to go again more and more practical. So this is how we learn, right? We started with the definition and unpacking what intersectionality was, and also looking at it from different lenses, from a coach, a coachee, an employee, an employer. And I would like to present a scenario and reflect with you on how it could be applied to coaching. So we have a little case study that is the following one. So Kevin is a millennial person born in Malaysia into a Muslim family. Kevin a passé de femme à homme. Ils sont arrivés à Ottawa il y a 10 ans. Ils vivent dans le quartier de Brampton. They have a background in business administration, and their lifelong dream is to own a tea business. Love it. So the question to the participants and also to our panelists is, what intersections do you see in this scenario? What do you need to be curious about as you prepare to work with Kevin? Donc, quelle intersection voyez-vous dans ce scénario-ci? De quoi devriez-vous être curieux dans votre préparation à travailler comme coach, comme employeur, comme collègue avec Kevin? Alors, dans le chat, on va commencer à avoir des réponses, mais en attendant qu'on ait des réponses, I will be turning to who would like to start the discussion on this one? Tejumo?
Oui, donc...
D'accord, merci.
Oui, donc... briefly, what I would say is that in a case like this, for me personally as a coach, I think this is the opportunity to really explore presenting issues. And the way that I would do this is really by listening, showing curiosity, inviting Kaveh to be at ease and to be more of him or herself and just tell me more. And I need to be curious. This is also the time for me as a coach to deeply listen and also realize the skills that I have that will be helpful to this person, and realize the skills that I don't have, and that's okay. And I think this is the first assessment that I would do before entering in any reaction, because we can't understand and master all the intersections. And it's good to know that, to know what we have and to know what we're bringing into this relationship. That's what I would start with. Merci.
See. Shery.
Oh, hi. Well, I would be speaking from the perspective of a coachee. And what I would be looking for from a coach as a coachee I would want somebody who comes with an open heart and an open mind. That's the first thing. I would want somebody who is curious and interested in who I am, what I need, and what I want to do. I would also want somebody who accepts me as I am and helps me to connect with myself at a deeper level. And finally, I would like somebody who helps me to reflect on the best of my life experiences on my personal journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Magdalene.
Yeah, so in addition to Tejumo and Shery, all great points, I think one of the things I'll keep in my mind before I meet this person is whether I have any additional resources where I might encourage this person to connect. For example, do I have a person who could potentially be a mentor to this person because he's looking to start a business in administration? Would I have a person who kind of matches some of his intersectionalities that would allow him perhaps to relate? I think it's important for us to recognize as coaches, we may not have the answer to all of the issues which a person may bring to us. So always have it at the back of our minds, what additional resources are available online in our communities, with our colleagues, with even our peer-to-peer or personal interactions, and are we able or willing to share these resources to create a better experience for this person? Thanks, Marie-Josée.
Thank you, Magdalene. Angela.
Yeah, wonderful. I so appreciate everything that's been shared so far. So what I would do, I would introduce my intersections. You know, recognizing our own intersections helps us to notice our own assumptions, to seek clarifications, and to let others in. I'd want to learn more about Kave's intersections by applying a tool like the one that I did at the beginning of our session today. So whether it be a visual or invite them to share some poetry or music. I mean, there could be all sorts of different ways where we could better understand, that I could better understand, and also Kave could better understand the intersections that Kave has. I'd also want to create a safe space, and I'd ask Kave to define what that space looks like. What does it sound like? What does it feel like? I'd introduce my diversity, equality, and inclusion statement for my coaching practice, whether it be part of the welcome package that I would offer to my clients, or I might even have it on the screen when they're in the waiting room so that they can read it before the beginning of a meeting. I would post my pronouns in Zoom and any other platform that I have, and I would invite my clients to do so as well if they so choose. Of course, it's so important to invite that deep listening, because when we invite that deep listening, we invite transparency, authenticity, and openness. Also, our own deep listening is so important that Tejumo spoke of and everyone spoke of. Deep listening means that we go beyond the words that are said. You know, with deep listening, we're using our eyes, our ears, our sense of touch, even our smell, our gut, our heart, our mind. We also notice what's not spoken and seeing what's not revealed and what often goes unnoticed. And I think that the last thing I would do is I'd include, I would incorporate analogies and storytelling. Sharing your own story as a coach is a very powerful way of communicating, of building trust and bridges, especially when commonalities aren't obvious. It allows a coachee to make the connection at an experiential level, you know, at a level of the heart, rather than just at the level of the mind. Storytelling can help remove the differentials that may be present at the beginning of a relationship between a coach and a coachee. So that's some of the things that I think would be helpful for working with Kaveh.
Oh, thank you. He's lucky, Kaveh. I will, a lot of the things that I see in the chat relates to what you were all saying. You know, creating and sharing a trustworthy space for better awareness of each other. And what I heard is not only to listen to Kaveh, but also as a coach to be vulnerable and share our story as well, to create that trust that was so key that Magdalene also highlighted. Another one was, I think we have a question here. Cannot deny that some members of our society want autoritarism, protect their white privilege. How do you suggest we approach such an intolerant person as a client? So that's a tough one, right? It's being in the coach seat and having this person that see the world only with their, you know, their glasses and cannot. So how do you open the minds of that person to see what you are seeing today? So I don't know if someone would like to react to that. Magdalene.
That's a very big question. I don't have a particular answer for it, but I just have a couple of nuggets that I want to share. As coaches, one thing to be always keep in the mind is that we may not be able to coach everyone. And that's really important. You need to recognize where those boundaries are and know how much you can go with someone. And if the client is not the right fit for you, it's important to be able to declare this, to say it in the softest, nicest, gentlest, because you could spend a year trying to coach and you get nothing out of it if the person's mind has already been made up about certain things. The second part of it is people don't know what they don't know. And I think as a coach, it's really important to kind of like share best practices, bring people, like I've worked with a couple of people with this kind of mindset, but I also know that when I've taken them into my diverse communities where they've had a chance to have a lunch, sit down, listen to conversation, the thoughts begin to change over time, because it's the thing about the othering, right? And we see ourselves as these perfect whole people that nothing is wrong with us, but something is wrong with them. But when we begin to have that appreciation for who the other is, and we begin to touch them and feel them and understand them, our concept of the world around them also changes.
Mm, yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. Other reaction? No? So la session arrive presque à...
has something, Marie-Josée.
Oh, Tejumo, merci. I don't see all of you on the screen at the same time. So allez-y, Tejumo, s'il vous plaît.
Donc, oui, ça c'est un point qui me touche beaucoup, et puis je pense que Magdalene a raison, on va arriver dans un espace avec quelqu'un où on n'a pas les mêmes affinités, mais je pense que en tant que coach, on a quand même les outils d'écouter l'autre, même si on n'est pas d'accord, au moins pour commencer la conversation, parce que on doit, je pense que quelque chose qui serait bien socialement, c'est d'arrêter le système de la honte, de honnir les autres parce qu'ils ont des opinions sur lesquelles on n'est pas d'accord. Nous sommes tous humains, nous avons tous des biais, mais au moins prendre la peine d'écouter, de voir nos différences et d'arriver à nos limites. Mais je ne serai pas quelqu'un qui d'emblée, parce que quelqu'un exprime la suprématie blanche, serait que je sors. Même si je ne suis pas d'accord, je voudrais être écouté parce qu'il y a d'autres choses en arrière que there's still things that are unseen, unheard, that I should be curious of with this person, even if we disagree. So I think we should also take the time with that person. We disagree, but they have a humanity and they deserve our attention and curiosity. And we should work with everybody. And in my world, I think personally, we shouldn't give up on anybody.
Merci. Yeah, we should all listen to with open heart and mind. And I see Shery yes, go ahead, Shery. 2 minutes.
Yeah, just half a minute. No, I just wanted to support everything that I've heard so far. I just wanted to add that I'm just a big proponent of telling stories and listening to stories as well. I come from a storytelling and culture. And so I'm thinking that with a person like that, yes, I would probably not want to work with that person, but I would also be curious to listen to the person's story. What is their life story? What brought them to this point? Because I have had to deal with people like that in my space. I mean, I opened in my experience, I opened my mind little by little, because first it started by just reading about other people's stories. Then I traveled. And the more I read, the more I traveled, the more I expanded my knowledge and the way I saw the world. So I would be curious to know, what is the person's story? What is their life story? What is their backstory that brought them to this point? So in a way, I'm agreeing with Tejumo as well. I think it's important to listen to the person's story.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What that person is holding on to. What's the fear out there of expanding the mind and the heart? So yes, staying curious. So la session arrive presque à sa fin. Je suis presque déçue. I would talk about intersectionality for a long time. I would like to invite participants to share in the chat. What have you learned so far? What are your main takeaways? Je suis vraiment curieuse de voir avec quoi vous repartez après 90 minutes de discussion, toujours trop court. Mais qu'avez-vous appris? Qu'est-ce qui vous a frappé, vous a surpris? And while you're doing that, I will do a tour de table to let the panelists talk a little bit about their takeaways. So let's start with, I don't have a name, so I don't know if somebody wants to, Angela?
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much. So these are really powerful times, and they're really important times. There's more momentum now for us to speak about the unspoken, listen for the unheard, and see the unseen. It's time to lead our organizations beyond the language of inclusion and fulfill our shared responsibility of creating spaces of belonging. Coaching empowers us to shape how we see ourselves and present ourselves to the world, rather than being shaped solely by how the world sees us. So I am initiating a community of practice to explore opportunities and challenges of living and coaching from a lens of intersectionality. And I hope people who are interested in this subject, who are part of this discussion and beyond, would join me in creating. We're looking at potentially a monthly virtual forum beginning this fall. And there's information here on the slide. People are welcome to contact me for more information or to sign up. And you can see the contact details there. But there's so much momentum right now. So I think and it is definitely something with my own coaching practice that I really would love to learn from other people who have been on this call, the panelists, and hear what people are thinking across Canada on this issue and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you, Angela. Shery.
I would just have end with a quote from a poet, very brief, because as I had mentioned before, my takeaway is that telling and sharing stories is really what's important. It's really important to provide a space for telling and sharing stories. So telling stories reminds us of our humanity in this beautiful, broken world. Terry Tempest Williams.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We should write the quote in the chat. That's so beautiful. Thank you. Tejumo.
Oui, donc merci beaucoup. Moi, le point de la fin, ce sera de dire que quand les personnes ont des intersections et sont différentes, ces intersections peuvent leur faire vivre la stigmatisation, le traumatisme, les préjugés, l'isolation, l'aliénation. Alors, quand les personnes viennent vers nous dans une relation de coaching, je pense que le rôle de cette relation et du coach aussi, c'est de faire pour que tous ces obstacles deviennent des non-obstacles à la personne, vraiment. Et je pense que c'est ça que je veux laisser avec les personnes qui nous écoutent.
Merci, Tejumo. Une société sans obstacles, ouverte. Alors, Magdalene, 2 minutes before we end this session.
Thank you, Marie-José. I have been so inspired with this panel and the preparation for it that I would say that my takeaway is not only from today. My takeaway is from a process which has included all of us to share, to learn from each other, and to observe and watch where we are all have different intersectionalities and how we could appreciate this and the process. So thank you all for this. I want to end with the quote by Shery that says, all human encounter is an opportunity to participate in the healing, the collective damage of how difference has been managed in our human history and the damage that it continues to do. And it's a call for each one of us to be individually aware of how that othering and that of the damage that has been done, and to consciously in our minds and our hearts become an advocate to say enough is enough. Let us heal the world. Let us heal ourselves. Let us heal our families, our communities, our organizations by opening, first of all, the awareness of to our own being that everyone matters. Everyone is important. Every one of us comes with our own set of issues that no one of us can be termed as any perfect person. And by seeing the intersectionalities within ourselves, the imperfections in ourselves, it becomes a lot easier to be non-judgmental about another person's intersectionalities. And by doing so, I think it's the opportunity for us to heal the damage that has already been done. Because, you know, Marie-José, if you really think about it, while I think across the history, we've always had intersectionalities, we never spoke about it as much as we did today. But the reason we speak so much about it today is because of that damage. It's because people are using their voices now to say, enough is enough, like treat me as a whole person. So I think if we can just shift our eyes to this for us first, and for everybody around that inner circle, and then the bigger organization, and then the country, I think we are going to create an amazing space for us to be present and for us to heal others as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And please, please speak up, speak loud. We want you on board, that's for sure. C'est un dialogue qui se continue. I see a lot of takeaways in the chat, and I'm also conscious that it's 3 o'clock, so I really want to close this, and really sad to close this session. But I really want to remind you that we will send you all the information. It will be posted on GC Collab. You have a list of resources that will be shared with you. Angela already launched the invitation for joining the community of practice. And we have also all the information for you at your disposal. So please join. Un chaleureux remerciement aux 2 techniciens qui ont travaillé dans l'ombre, mais qui rien n'aurait pu être possible sans eux. A huge thank you to the panelists that devoted their time in preparing this session and sharing their stories. Thank you so much. I learned so much. It's always a pleasure to be working with you. We will conclude on this session. However, the panelists are so generous, so they have offered to stay and stick around for another 15 minutes. So if participant wants to stay, you are welcome to stay and ask your questions to the panelists after this session. So let's continue the dialogue. Thank you so much for your wisdom, all panelists, participants, and we can start, we can stop the recording, technician. Thank you.